We have had occasion where staff have been quite homophobic when we've done that session.
What do they do?
For example, as Andrew described the name game before, when we've done the photographs and they've used the names that are in that name game, just going along saying, oh, pick the picture up, shirt lifter, puff, fudge packer, all that sort of language. We thought, I think, at one time that they were joking, but it actually became evident in the session that they were actually quite homophobic and didn't feel there was a need to do this work in school.
It's all a bit of a laugh, except when you're on the receiving side of homophobia in school.
There was an example of a boy who was suspended from school for a few days for, these are not my words, but for accusing a PE teacher of being gay. I'm sure this teacher wasn't gay. The point was that the reason for the suspension seemed to be that a boy couldn't do anything more terrible than suggest that someone was gay. But no student that I ever battled with was ever suspended for their homophobic abuse of me.
If kids had been racist, they would be internally excluded or suspended. These kids were just told off. I was made to sit in a room with the girl who physically assaulted me while we had a discussion about why she'd done it. But homophobia was never mentioned.
Bolton Health Promotion, with help from the school and funds from the police, has produced a resources pack and video to use in lessons and for training. Stonewall has produced its own material as part of a campaign called Education for All. At the campaign's heart are 10 things schools can do to create an inclusive culture. It reflects much of the approach taken in Bolton: gathering evidence, challenging homophobia throughout school, addressing training needs for all staff, using outside agencies. It points schools towards groups such as Schools Out. They can offer support outside and inside the classroom. It's an offer that so far is only rarely taken up.
We need to get into schools to get the message across, not just in places like Manchester and London and Brighton, but outside in the smaller towns and the provinces, where a lot of schools still tend to think that it's not an issue, or brush it under the carpet, or pretend that it's not an issue because something else is going on that they see is more important.
Here, sixth formers have gone into groups to consider the causes and forms of homophobic bullying. Tony is soon confronted with one of the main difficulties facing everyone attempting to tackle homophobia: an unwillingness to accept that it is a problem.
My mate is gay. There's never been any problems whatsoever. Everyone's just accepted, even the lads are fine with him and everything. There's never been a problem.
I've never seen it bullying, actually bullying.
Have you ever organised it?
But I know at my school there was never anything like that.
Well, I accept there's geographical differences. I mean, being near Manchester, which is probably one of the most gay-friendly places in Britain, would be very different from the education experience of, say, learning in Inverness. And also, of course, a lot of people at school, they don't actually know their sexuality. They haven't come to terms with their sexuality, maybe, but also they might not have actually realised what it is, not yet. They might, you know, still be thinking about it. And they're people who are going to be influenced by things like homophobic bullying as well. And that's another thing that we need to think about. Okay?
I don't know, it's just showing it. No, I just don't agree that there is a lot of bullying against gays in schools. I don't think there is. I don't know, it might just be from my school, because my school that I went to has a very strict, like, non-bullying. They don't agree with it at all, they won't allow anything, and they're really strict on it, and that might be why there wasn't any in our school. But
there were a couple of people who said, well, it doesn't impact on me, you know, it doesn't affect me. I know somebody who's gay at school, and if anybody gives him any trouble, he gives us good back. But, you know, they're very lucky, and that person is very lucky, and my heart goes out to them. But unfortunately, it is still an issue in most schools, and I had to remind them of that. But it's good that that came out, and it's good that we could challenge it.
Like that man said, like, if you don't, like, if it doesn't apply to you and you've never seen it happening, then you can't really relate to it as well as if you've already seen it from somewhere. Obviously he's had first-hand experience, like, and he's seen it happening to people, and he's talked to people about it that, like, has happened to them. So yeah, I agree with his views, but I've never seen it myself, so.
The sixth formers may have been challenging, but all agreed by the end of the session that it did make them think more about their attitudes or those of others.
It made you open your eyes a bit to, like, the fact that the bullying does go on, but because a lot of the time you don't really see it unless you're involved in it yourself. You don't really know what goes on. It's not really a public thing, is it?
It made me think about how people that got bullied about it actually felt. I'd never thought about that before, so it did change my views quite a bit.
Tackling homophobia has become part of the teacher training course here at Bishop Grosseteste College in Lincoln. Trainees are taught to deal with issues of sexuality and also to confront any lingering fears over Section 28.
It makes them nervous, it makes them want to be looking over their shoulders on this particular issue. And sex and relationships education in general is a sensitive issue, but this one is even more sensitive than that.
The college is organising a national conference next spring called Beyond the Shadow of Section 28. The belief is that homophobia must be tackled with the same urgency and the same resolve as racism.
We have come a long way in the last 20 or 30 years in schools about identifying racial prejudice and racial bullying in schools, name-calling and so on, identifying it, putting a ring round it and saying that's not acceptable in schools. Schools need to be safe places for ethnic minorities. And I think we're now in a position of getting deeper consciousness about sexual diversity and saying basically the same thing. Schools need to be safe places for sexual minorities as well as for racial minorities.
The feeling in this group is that teachers who don't deal with the issue of same-sex relationships are failing in their responsibility to primary pupils, although there's no conclusion about when exactly it should be raised.
It would also help other children who have got a mum and a dad accept families where there are two mums or two dads and help them be more understanding towards that family.
Yeah, definitely. If you sort of target the situation early on, then later on it's going to be, they're just going to, it's normal, isn't it?
In my opinion, I think if you leave it till secondary school, it's too late. The prejudices are there. But obviously, too young, the children can't understand basically. So I think it needs to be thought about.
Have you thought about it?
It's quite, I don't know, it's difficult. I do think before senior school, so perhaps upper key stage 2, so that's like year 6 children, but ideas need to be introduced earlier.
I think I'd be very wary about teaching it with primary. But I'd be talking about, rather than focusing on the types of relationship, just saying how two people together feel when they're in love and doing it from that point of view.
So at which point do you start talking about single-sex relationships?
I think I'd have to be very careful about the school's policy and how they'd get the feeling from the head teachers, from the management, and see what their views are before I can address it myself.
Maybe in the past we have reacted, we've tried to deal with bullying when it's taken place, when it's far better to try and stop the bullying occurring in the first place and developing that culture of respect for all people and respect for differences.